Ah, there it is, my personal second most disappointing Ghostbusters game. Now, for a bit of context by what I mean by this. This is a game that I wanted to play for many years, way back in the days of Xbox Live on the 360. And since the 360 store is going down this year, I decided to go back and get games that I've always wanted but never actually got around to buying. And this was the first stop. And I'm playing this game many years later, after enjoying the greatness that was the 2009 game, but also the other most disappointing game, the Spirits Unleashed. So I've already been burned at least once, but that's a story for a different time. So then that leads us to the game we're going to talk about today, and I guess there's no better place to start than its confusing story. The game starts off in 2010 BC as we learn the backstory of the main villain of the game, Damzu the Destroyer, or Dumazu, whatever, and how he'll one day return to take over the world and all that good stuff. Presented to us via honestly really well drawn comic art for the entire game, all the cutscenes are, so at least that's a positive so far. But anyway, after this introduction of the bad guy, it immediately cuts to 1989-80 after the events of Ghostbusters 2. As we see the French guy from that movie, or whatever he was with the funny accent, get put into a mental hospital for all the stuff he did in that movie. And wow, I'm already just now realizing that there's already a confusing aspect to this. A very, very nitpicky one, I might admit, but still. In the movie, the whole entire, thing is leading up to New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day, or whatever, because that's what the guy at the beginning says, that the world will end on New Year's. And because of that, I would imagine that the final battle that they have is at, as soon as the year was changing. So realistically, this should be starting off in 1990 instead of 89. And oh boy, we've only just started. But anyway, here the French guy meets another insane person who's, sick, or 100 years old or whatever. And he is a server or minion or whatever of Damzu, trying to make him come back. And the French guy is willing to help him if he promises that he'll get Dana in return. Now, here comes the discrepancy on my part, at least, because after this, it cuts back to present day, which at this point would have been 2010. I say this for two reasons. The first of which is that the two guys, the French guy mainly, goes out and, steals a shard from the museum in order to get the big bad guy to, come to the world, or come into the world. And while the entire game is about collecting these shards, and there's 4 of them, but the opening cutscene makes it seem like there's only one. And because of that, it kind of just looks like it takes place a few days later or whatever, when he would just go back to the museum and break in, instead of literally 20 years later. Yeah, this, I guess, could have been explained much better, because it does just seem like they waited 20 years just to break in. The second thing is when we actually go back to the actual Ghostbusters, and they're concerned about how there's more ghosts in the city than usual, leading them to decide to get a few new recruits. And Ray doesn't like the idea of bringing in more rookies again. Now, on its own, that could be just a throwaway line, but they do specifically say again as if this has happened before, which it has in the 2009 game, where you actually play as a rookie joining the team. But to my knowledge, this game doesn't confirm that this is basically a sequel to that game. But then here's the reason I bring it up. I do believe that this was meant to be a sort of sequel, or I guess continuation or whatever, to the 2009 game originally, but then for whatever reason they just decided it not to be. I don't know, it just seems like the story would be much more coherent if it jumped from 1989 to 1992 or whatever, instead of literally 20 years later. It also would have made more sense with all the reused assets and the fact that the driving levels, all the cars are from the original, or the 2009 game, so they're all based in 1990s. But then the first level contradicts this, because there's HD TVs that you could destroy, so I honestly have no clue what they were going for at this point. Or no, wait, it says LCD TV, which were originally invented in the 60s, so for all I know this actually supports my theory. But anyway, the story sees the 4 new recruits, which are the 4 characters that you play as, going into well, locations trying to find the shards to prevent Damzu's return. And that basically wraps up the story, so next I'm gonna briefly talk about the characters. And I do mean briefly because there isn't very much to say with them, which I guess is a bit unfortunate. But anyway, in this foursome we have Alan, Bridget, Gabriel, and Samuel. And well, to start off, none of them have voice actors. This entire game has no voice actors, I'm just now realizing, so that kind of sucks. And really, they don't really talk much. I mean, they talk in the cutscenes and through the game through conversations, but I mean, really they're just one archetype, and that's really it. Like, Gabriel is the nerd, Samuel is an idiot, Bridget is bratty, and Alan, I guess, is the asshole. I don't know, part of me wants to say that this is like a dyed extreme Ghostbusters team, but also part of me says that isn't entirely accurate, so take that for what it is. And I'm just now remembering that there is a fifth member that you don't even play as, that just appears in like 2 missions, that only drives you around. So yeah, there's really nothing to these 4 characters. And I mean, choosing any of them is really inconsequential because none of them have their own very own like personal bonuses to each other, which I feel like would have helped out your selection at the very least. If they didn't have character, at least they had something that could help you out in the gameplay. But anyway, that knocks out the characters. Now I'm gonna quickly knock out the graphics of the music, because there really isn't much to write home about with these 2 categories. The graphics are somewhere between does the job and like above average. I mean, they look good, but again, nothing really that mind-blowing here. Although I guess I'll squeeze in that it's unfortunate that the locations that they use are limited and dull. And it doesn't help that like 3/4 of them are just reused from the 2009 game. You know, you go to the Sedgwick Hotel, and then you go to a mental asylum, and then you go into the sewers, and then you go to a graveyard. But then you go back literally to every single place twice. So it kind of sucks that there's no real variety here, outside of the driving levels. But I will say again, I do give kudos to them doing the comic art, which looks pretty unique. And the same just goes for the music, really. Because outside the main menu theme, which is obviously the Ghostbusters theme, there's really nothing too exciting in this, I guess. None of these music tracks are gonna make you, like, go out of the way to listen to them online or something, assuming you actually look for them, because when I tried to look for music for this video, I couldn't find anything. So all the music in this is either from the movies or from the 2009 game. Alright, with that all out of the way, let's now move on to the big dogs of, well, the gameplay. And the gameplay seems to be a throwback to twin-stick arcadey shooters. You know, you move with the left stick and then shoot your proton pack with the right stick. But to shake things up, there's different types of enemies based off of what color they are. Like, if they're red, you fight them with the proton pack, but if they're yellow, you fight them with, like, the sonic wave or whatever that is. And most of the times you'll be doing this while running around, but sometimes, like I said before, there will be times where you're shooting off the back of a car while it drives. And yeah, that's basically it. Fighting off the ghosts while you revive your partners if needed be. And well, at the very least, I could say that this is a good concept for a Ghostbusters game, plus the fact that I'm just a sucker for these types of games in general. It's just that everything else that surrounds it just fumbles it so hard that it drags the game so far down. Now, before I start talking about why this is, I should probably mention that this game obviously has multiplayer, and I did not get around to playing with people because obviously no one's going to be playing it. And well, the usual argument with multiplayer games is that everything is much more fun when playing with friends, and perhaps that is true with this game as well. But the issue comes when you try to build an entire game based around playing it with other people, as it kind of leads to the situation with this game where I don't want to say it's unplayable by yourself, but it's very difficult to do so. The first reason is because of the bad AI that your teammates have. You know, they'll get up in the face of a ghost just to get knocked down by it, and they won't revive other teammates or fail to revive us. It just gets more frustrating as the game goes on, when the ghosts start getting much more tougher and more of them start spawning in. But speaking of the difficulty, there's another issue there because, well, I mean, in a normal game like this, the game would be expected to get harder as it goes along, but the issue is that when it does it in this game, you're kind of just not prepared for it. More specifically, there is no upgrades to be found within this game. I mean, there are power-ups like a shield that protects you and weapons upgrade, but they're too far and few between that they're just not enough. And man, I really do feel like if it did have upgrades, that would fix a whole lot of problems. Because it seems like the farther you go into the game, there are just so many issues. You have no health, your weapons feel so weak, and slow. Like the ones that have projectiles feel so delayed when shooting. And on top of that, this game has a scoring system that is counted out as if it's money. So would it have been that really hard to just have upgrades that you could buy with the money? Because as the game is, the money or the points or whatever is only there just to get as high a score as you can, or to just beat your friends or the AI, whoever you're playing with. So in other words, just pointless, really. I mean, the 2009 game did this perfectly. You bust Ghost, you get money, then you could go to a menu to buy upgrades to help you improve your damage output. But I gotta say, the worst place for all this stuff to happen, like the bad AI, the bad controls, and the just overly lopsided difficulty, is the boss fights, as it creates a perfect storm of bullshit. Although before I start this rant, I will say there is one thing that I like about the bosses. That is at the end when you capture them and you have to play a button minigame. Although it is pretty stupid that the thing goes super slow, so then you keep pressing the buttons too fast for it and then you lose score because of it. But anyway, back to what I was saying. I mean, there's just something really annoying about being the only one up who has to fight against the boss, trying to revive my teammates, and the boss being right on my ass with his minions and tail because my character is slow as hell, and every time I want to attack them, he just stops what he's doing, and I basically have to keep peppering damage onto the big boss and just avoid his attacks, and if I just slip up in the slightest sense, it's all over. I gotta restart the whole boss fight again. I mean, just what absolute horse shit. But yeah, with that rant over, I guess that's really all I gotta say about this awful game. You know, I started this review saying that this game was very disappointing, but the more I played it, the more I talked about it, I realized something. It truly does suck. You know, I brought up the 2009 game a lot in this, basically sucking it off, but it really is a great game. You should check it out, especially if you're a fan of Ghostbusters, obviously.